All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to meet you all. That was a really fun game. I didn't know any of the answers, but it's fun to see your faces and hear about your favorite books. Um, so I am co-founder of Global Urban Village. Um, this is just showing me my face, so I don't know why it's doing that. I'll worry about that in a moment. Anyway, Global Urban Village is an impact investing company. We focus on supporting entrepreneurs with impact businesses, specifically in Southeast Asia. We work with Vilgro on several different projects, actually, so it was really exciting for me to get invited to join you guys today and share some information about investment. So I'm coming to you today, joining from actually Northern California in the middle of a blizzard. So it's not my usual office here. There's a funny photo behind me. And I'll show you if I can get my screen open here. I'll show you a picture because I'm pretty sure there aren't any blizzards in the Philippines.
I will share. Sorry, Liz. You're co-host though, so you should be able to present.
Share screen. Yeah.
So is that working yet? Oh no.
There.
How
There,
about now?
it's working.
Oh,
Okay.
So you're in the part of California that's snows, and there's the other part that doesn't experience snow, right?
Yes, it's a very large state. So there you go. Here's a picture I thought would be fun to share with you guys. So here in this snowy blizzard environment, we're actually, if the snow melts and when we're able to get out of here, we're just 2 hours from the Silicon Valley. And the Silicon Valley, as you know, is the heart and center of venture capital in the world. And it has been in that position for many years, but it is an exciting time of change in that the focus of venture capital and deal making has started to spread to other geographies. So it's started to spread in the United States, in other cities like Seattle or New York. It's also started to spread around the world, including Southeast Asia. And this is good news for all of us because of our interest in Southeast Asia and in accessing capital to support businesses in Southeast Asia. Oh, I have to admit somebody from the waiting room. So that's a trend of change that's happening in the space. Another trend that's changing in the investment space is a focus on gender lens investing. And this is also great news for all of the women in this course. The shift to focus on gender lens investing is an effort around the world to bring equity to male and female entrepreneurs' access to capital. And that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. So let's talk a little bit more about women entrepreneurs. There's an effect they call the female alpha. The female alpha is basically shows us that the research proves out that not only is gender equity a goal that is a just and right goal, it also has a very strong business case. So the truth is, women-led businesses actually prove out to have higher ROI and higher revenue when compared to their male counterparts, which is a really incredible fact, which would lead us all to believe that investors should just be scrambling to invest in women-led businesses. But that's not the reality that we're in. In fact, only 7% of investments actually go to women. And I'm sure you guys have heard this before, and I'm not saying this to be discouraging because we're going to talk about what we can do about that. So as the global shift happens and gender lens investing becomes more broad spread and more investment floods into Southeast Asia to support businesses like yours, we want to be sure that we're capturing that opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about where capital comes from. Now, we're not talking geography here. This is more about the holders of capital and the types of organizations and people that hold capital with the intent to deploy that capital as an investment. So that can be anything from friends and family, crowdfunding, foundations, venture capital. This particular graph that I'm showing you here is actually early stage businesses and a survey in a Harvard study. And these sources of capital are typically controlled by men. So as women in this environment, we need to be able to approach the men that hold the decision making and convince them to invest in our business. Of course, with Gender Lens Investing and the shift in focus to empower women around the world, there are more and more women represented in the leadership of these types of organizations, but it's still a vast difference between men and women. So in many situations where we're pitching for capital, we would be, as women, trying to convince men. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about investment readiness. So investment readiness, stepping away from the gender conversation for a moment, applies equally across any early stage business. Basically, investment readiness is an indication of how prepared you are to approach an investor, have a pitch meeting, and access the capital that you want. At Global Urban Village, we do a lot of one-on-one consulting. So we use a model where we do an assessment based on 5 key areas, and these are pretty standard, probably no surprise to anybody on the call. We look at team, market, product, business model, and investment offering. The investment offering is your pitch deck, perhaps the story that you tell that we're able to listen to, if it's that type of opportunity, as well as your financial forecasting. When we do the assessment, we would go through in detail and give feedback on all 5 of these elements and make recommendations for how to improve to be more ready to land that deal. The recommendations that we make almost always fall into these 3 categories: strategy, financial model, and investment communications. These 3 elements, again, are pretty straightforward. It's nothing surprising. Investment readiness is about reaching the full articulation of your strategy in a compelling way, having a financial model that shows at least 5 years of projection with strong assumptions that you can defend well in a conversation or on paper. And then investment communications, including your pitch deck, the way you tell your story verbally, and the way you tell your story with numbers. We also always recommend to do a lot of analysis in preparation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So in this class, I know that, or this program, in the We Rise program, I know that you guys are going to have more content about financials and about pitch decks. So we're not going to focus a lot of our time and energy on that today. I do want to cover just a few recommendations around communication and analysis to focus your attention on things that apply both equally to male and female business owners that are trying to pitch for capital, just to kind of keep in mind some of the basic foundational concepts that you want to achieve when you're feeling or when you're showing up to pitch. So show up with confidence, prepare and practice, present a clear vision of your business now and in the future, which is also something that you'll show through your financials. Show your passion and what makes you special. Many investors say that they're really investing in people, not just businesses. So it's important that you bring that energy to the table. And demonstrate awareness of decision maker objectives. So that is about understanding the investor that you're talking to. Not all investors are created equal. We saw that there are very many different types of sources of capital. And with every meeting that you have, you should research that organization, understand their objectives, and even research that person if you can, and understand what their motivations are as well as you can from their digital footprint. Analysis. You want to go in for your ask with a number in mind, and we'll take a look a little bit more closely about some details of how you frame the negotiation. But you want to go in knowing your ask and knowing how you want to use your funds. You want to calculate a valuation based on industry norms that you can explain clearly. There's multiple ways to do this, but it's important that once you've selected a method that you're able to explain it if the investor asks how you got your valuation. You need to prepare a multi-year financial forecast, as I mentioned before, with assumptions based on market knowledge and product testing. And then also have a few key metrics ready. Margins, unit economics, sales, and revenue numbers. These are the types of things that come up in conversation, and you want to have them in the back pocket. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about fundamentals, I want to circle back again to the gender question. So why are women only receiving 7% of investment funding? We know that if you do all of the types of preparation that I'm talking about, meeting these fundamentals, and you go to your investor meeting, the results are still going to be weighted against your favor. So I want to talk about some strategies that will help to mitigate that gap. There's been a lot of research because of the increasing interest in improving gender equity. And so I've read a lot of this research, and I've kind of narrowed it down into 3 key areas that we're going to look at where the research tells us information that we can then use some tricks and strategies to address those issues. Let's see, I'll read them off. Networks, navigation, and negotiation. So these 3 different areas are essentially ways that we as individuals can affect the change that we want to see. You know, it's going to take changes in large organizations and in the institutional capital management around the world to change the equality issue. But there's also things we as individuals can do to improve our chances. So let's talk about networks. Networks are actually a strength when they look at research by gender, a strength that women have. Women are great at building networks, but the research also shows us that women are not as effective at using their networks and gaining value out of their networks. So I want to take a look at how we can improve and expand our networks to gain access to funding. The first step to getting an investment meeting is having access to an investor. So let's take a look at how we can expand our networks to include more investors. So this is our first exercise for the evening or the morning. And so what I'd like to have you guys do is fill out the questionnaire. And let me ask Yo, are we ready to use Miro for this, or are we going to, I have a backup plan if the Miro's not ready.
For the sheet, we've prepared an individual sheet for each one.
Okay,
And then we do have a Miro board for the brainstorming, note taking.
great. So how should I pass the sharing back to you, or how should I move us to looking at the sheet to fill out?
Rafi, maybe the Miro board. We could share
Yeah.
the Miro board.
I'll present the Miro board, and then each one could open their sheets, and then from there, I mean, everyone can just throw around ideas during the plenary, and then we'll be the one to take note and add the sticky note to the Miro board so everyone could see.
Okay, so how do we get to the questions?
So I will provide.
Share the link, Rafi, to share the folder to
Yep.
everyone.
Hi, everyone. So I've shared a link to the Google folder. It has your enterprise name. So kindly just open it and then you'll see a set of questions there. Um, Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, will give them 5 minutes to answer this. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
So what I want you to do is go through the directions just described to get to the document, and then there'll be a few simple questions just to help you think about who you know and think about your network, and then we'll talk about ways to grow that network. Okay?
sure. Any
Maybe
answer?
we could have a little music or something. Let's see. How do we do that?
Oh, I could play music. Don't worry. I'll just have to share my screen for it.
um, and come back to the group. And what we're going to do next is talk a little bit about what actions we can take. So you've written down some names and some people that you know. So you have in your network already these people, but there are ways to then utilize the people that you know to continue and expand that network. So while we talk about this, I'm going to ask Raf to go ahead and take notes on the brainstorming on Miro so that we can capture all the ideas of the group. And then at the end of this exercise, we're going to set a couple of networking goals for ourselves. Okay, so I want to tell you guys a story, and it's actually the story of how I met Priya. So I had it's a little, there's multiple steps to it. I had a couple of meetings with other investor contacts in the US that had both mentioned to me an investor network in Southeast Asia that they thought I should contact as part of my exploration in Southeast Asia. So, little context to provide. My co-founder is also my husband, Ian Fishburne, and we founded this business. And our first step was to go explore the impact entrepreneurship ecosystem in Southeast Asia, and basically, you know, build our network, build our understanding, and create partnerships, improve our network, and build our business based on that. And so I'd had a couple of meetings that said, go and call this specific organization, and they will be a great point of contact for you. So I reached out to the Investor Network organization. I think it was Andy. And I had a call with somebody who worked there and explained what my business was and what I was doing in Southeast Asia. I had the call, I was in Hong Kong at the time, and had a great conversation. And the person I was speaking with said, you know, if you're going to be going to Bangkok, you should meet my colleague there. So then when I was in Bangkok, I had a meeting with the colleague that she introduced me to. And I had a great conversation with this particular contact. And at the end of the conversation, I said, do you know anybody that might be interested in what we're doing? We had talked a lot about housing innovations and future of work. Those are two of the areas that we focus our investment strategy on. And so this person said, I know just the person who would want to meet with you guys. And she introduced us to another person. And this was a friend at Habitat for Humanity. And when I met with her, she said, I know just the person that would be great to meet with next. And that was Priya. So a long chain of events there. We started our conversation with Priya on the phone, and then later on another time, we were able to meet in person at a conference that was in Bali. So a lot of hopping around geography, but what I'm trying to point out through this story is that with each of the links in the connection network, there was a different type of action that supported the growth of my network. A big part of it was showing, being, open and honest, explaining what my business and what my mission was. And then also making sure to ask new contacts to make an introduction for me to somebody else I might want to know or that might want to know me. So in the story, there are several different examples of things that are useful in network building. Attending a conference is very useful in network building. That was a chance for me to meet Priya in person when we had already been building our relationship over the phone. And then there are many other contacts at the conference, of course. And one of the keys that you want to do after a conference is to make sure to follow up with everyone and continue the conversations. So I tell this story just to kind of point out that there are a lot of different methods that you can use. And I wanted to see if anybody in the group wants to share a story about how they got a new contact. It doesn't have to be as crazy as that story, but just an example from your experience about how you met a business contact. Anyone can jump in, or we'll pull out that wheel thing and just dial it up.
Yeah, maybe I can share.
Okay.
Because I just had my recent meeting with the possible business contact in the US. So yeah, like last year I was representing Philippines for the ASEAN Korea Startup Week. So I was able to pitch. I was one of the top 18 startups to pitch in the event. So one of the judges is I don't know if you know him, Lisa. His name is Babakia. He's a professor in Boston University and also an advisor for Techstar for startups. So he mentors also some startups in Techstar US. So last year we had an exchange of email like twice, and we were trying to fit in a schedule for a short e-meeting to discuss possible support or maybe guides on how I can move forward with my startup. So yeah, because of the Christmas break and everything is happening too fast, so we have set for a meetings last Monday, and it was like 10:30 p.m. in the Philippines, and it's like 9 in the Pacific area time. So he got interested with my company because one is he said everybody's operating in a macro lens of tech, and I think the micro is your market. That's his reason in really kind of luring me to really talk to him with the business. So and I think you fit that micro as you start growing your business. And it was really a light conversation, and he said just keep on going, email me if you need you have questions, and I will put you in my list of contacts of startups that are really promising, and mention you. Actually, I already mentioned you with some of my partner companies, as he mentioned. So yeah, that's my recent experience of building my connection. And yeah, it's a good start for me really to maybe knowing the business atmosphere or the startup atmosphere outside of the Philippines, because I'm more into tech product and not just for kind of focusing on some e-commerce output. So yeah, that's my
Very cool.
recent experience.
Great, that's a great one. Ray, did you want to share as well?
Oh, it's actually a question, Lisa, on like, especially for some of us who really don't have the experience or that I didn't have the chance to speak to somebody or be part of or a fair or a networking event, if ever you come across a person or somebody, like what do you tell that person? Do you jump into the idea right away? So kind of like want to understand how you really approach somebody who might be potentially interested in you and funding in any way.
Yeah. How to approach, so the question is how to approach somebody who might be able to help you access funding. Yeah. I mean, I think that the best way to do any kind of approach to anyone in the business world is to be really clear about what business is and what your objective is in connecting with them. So whether it's a cold outreach on LinkedIn that I'm sending or an email that I'm sending to somebody I've never met, I really try to be myself, be really clear in explaining what my business is and why I think that, they might be interested or why I want to contact them. Am I trying to learn from them? Am I trying to just grow my network? It's okay to say that. Am I hoping to have a meeting with them? So making it just very clear and concise. Here's 1 or 2 sentences. This is what my business is about. Here's how I found you, or, why I'm reaching out to you. And here's what I hope to achieve together. And that is kind of the basic framework that I use, whether it's completely cold or whether it's somebody that you've already been introduced to. In the story that I was telling, there was kind of a chain of introductions that occurred. Sometimes it would be more of a situation where I would just I would research something online and find a person or an organization I really want to know, and then just spend the time and attention to craft a very thoughtful email. And I've been very successful at getting doors to open by doing that. You always want to be respectful of people's time. Really clear objective that you have for the meeting is. And you probably don't want to come out of a cold contact environment and just say, I hope you want to fund my company. That's a little too much. It might be a little bit more that I'd like to strike up a conversation with you. I'd like to introduce my business. If you're asking for a pitch meeting, it's fine to do that, but only if you already know that that investor is accepting pitch meetings at that time. Otherwise, you probably want to start with more of an introduction meeting.
Can I do a follow-up,
Thanks.
Lisa? Question. I just like to, yeah, thank you. I just want to do a follow-up question.
Okay.
How do you follow up? Like if that contact has not replied to you, or you try to send an intro meeting, how do you reach out again? And what's a good time to reach out again after like how many weeks or attempts after you send that first? Yeah.
I would say 2 things to that. I would wait a week and then send a simple follow-up saying, just wanted to check whether you received my message and see if you might be interested in what I proposed. And the other thing I would say to that is sometimes it's just not meant to be. I would not follow up again unless there is an absolute reason why this person should respond, because sometimes people are too busy or they're not interested, and that's fine because there are other people out there. And so you don't want to put too much of, it's, you mentioned the giving tree. It's like it's a matter of giving. In a sense, you put yourself out there in a very open and genuine way, and you hope that that person will come to meet you. And if they don't, just let it go. That's my thinking on it.
Okay. Really, really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Does anybody else have a question or want to share a story of meeting a new contact? Okay. Well, let's see what we have on our brainstorming board. Um, let's see. I would like to ask you guys, maybe we could do this on the chat. Um, to add to our brainstorming board, why don't we just all take a couple minutes to think of different ideas that would be ways to grow our network. So I will also join in and throw a few things in on the chat to get everybody's, thinking flowing. And then we'll add these to our board. And in the end, we should have a nice collection of different ideas that we can all refer to. And we'll add those ideas to the people that we wrote down before, and we'll come up with some action plans. Okay, so just jump over to the chat, and what we're brainstorming is ways to meet new people and expand our networks. All right, so now I want everybody to refer back to the list that they made of people. And we're not sharing these with each other, but what I want you to do is think through, or you don't need to share your list of people, I mean, but what I want you to do is think through one or two of the people that you have listed there, and one of these actions that you might want to utilize. And what I want you to do is identify two different goals that you will do after today to either reach out to one of the people on that list or to do one of these type of actions that we've talked about. Let's say 3 goals, because they could be really small things like doing a new LinkedIn connection. Okay, that's just one small thing, but joining a new entrepreneur community, that's a much bigger step. So let's identify 3. Okay, so we'll shift from goals. I like that goal so much. I'm going to show you a little trick on LinkedIn. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, what I'm going to do is share my screen. And I'm going to show you guys a little trick about using your LinkedIn network to expand your funding network. So many people are familiar with using LinkedIn like a Rolodex. You connect with your business contacts there. It allows you to keep them organized. It helps you to keep in touch as well. And it also gives you an environment to promote your business. So it has a lot of really great superpowers in terms of networking and marketing for your business and for your personal brand as well. So I'd like to show you doing a LinkedIn search. Why don't I do, I'll just put impact investing, that's fine. So I want to look at how I can grow my network in terms of potential funding partners. And so I'm going to go to my LinkedIn and search impact investing. You could also search banking or whatever type of investment you're seeking, whether it's debt or equity, impact investing or venture capital, and just put that into the search. And then you want to go ahead and pick people. Now, the next thing over is connections. So this is going to say first, second, and third. A first tier connection is somebody you are already directly connected with. And second would be the people that they're connected with. So this is where LinkedIn gets really powerful. If I click first, it's going to show me the people I already know. So in this particular moment, I'm going to include them, but really I'm kind of interested in seeing the second tier connections. So this kind of shows me what my network could connect, who my network could connect me to. So it comes up with a whole bunch of results. And what I can then do is look through these results, and you can, hopefully you can see this little arrow here that I'm moving around, my cursor. I can look at, let's see, we'll go down and look at Giselle Leung. And she actually, it shows at the bottom here, all these other connections that we share. So if I see that this person has one shared connection with me, then I can think about, who is John Stanberg? How well do I know him? Is he somebody I could request to connect me to Brian? But when I see a contact like Giselle that has we have multiple shared connections, that is an even better indicator that there would be a path for me to meet Giselle if I wanted to. Or, if there's 5 shared connections, I might just reach out to her and say, I noticed that we have a lot of shared connections. I'd love to connect with you and, stay in touch. And so that would also be a method where you could expand your network. Another approach would be, like I mentioned, you can see the names here, and not everybody in your LinkedIn network is going to be somebody you know really well. Some might be people that you met one time at a conference, and some might be people that you went to kindergarten with. I mean, you could have known them your whole life. And there's a difference in how much you can ask of people that you know well versus people you don't know as well. So it can be really useful to take this search view and scroll through and think about, okay, Sequoia. I know Sequoia quite well, so I'm going to go ahead and ask her if she'll introduce me to Leon at Damson Capital, because, well, Damson Capital has a fantastic research arm. I love their research. I've been wanting to meet somebody there. So that's just an example. I think that this tool can be really helpful, not just for searching for funding connections, but you could also be searching for, industry leaders. You could be searching for, businesses to connect for your supply chain, and also customers, depending on what you sell in your business. So I just thought that'd be a fun little trick to show, a really powerful tool. There's, so much we could cover about LinkedIn, but I just wanted to share that one little one. And thank you to everyone who shared their goals. So, okay, now that we've covered off networks, the key takeaways I want you to keep in mind in all of the different ways that we've talked about in making new connections, I think it's always really important, and especially as women, that we be bold. And by that, I mean, ask for the connections that you want to make. Go ahead and reach out to people that you don't know. Take a risk on putting yourself out there and requesting a meeting. So that's being bold. Be authentic. Share your real self. Share your real aspirations, and bring yourself to the table in your messages. And when you are able to make those meetings happen, and then be generous. Be generous is about the fact that sometimes people are going to reach out to you in this way. And especially as your leadership grows and your business grows, there might be other young women who reach out and look up to you. There might be people that want to connect or want to get advice from you. And so you always want to be generous in the sense that, you're thoughtful about others and you're thoughtful about what you can give in the process of networking. Okay, so we've covered off networking. We looked into, the research saying that women don't use their networks as effectively. We've talked about ways to do that. We've set some goals. Now we're going to step forward into the navigation stage. So once you get that meeting and you show up and make your pitch, the research actually shows that VCs, and this applies to other types of investors as well, talk about men and women entrepreneurs differently, and they ask them different types of questions, which affects the funding that they receive. So this particular research is really a helpful revelation for us as women in creating a position that will allow us to be successful. The reason that investors ask different questions is typically not an explicit bias. So I want to explain a little bit about explicit and implicit bias first. Most investors are not, a bad person who doesn't want to support women. Typically, It's, you know, the decision makers are often male, but they have wives. They might have, children, daughters. They probably have a mother. They probably consciously want to support women, but at the same time, the cultural conditioning and the historical context has an effect on our minds that there's an unconscious prejudice or belief system that then affects our actions. And implicit bias is in effect all the time in all of us. It's part of how our brain works. And the way to tackle implicit bias, is to make it explicit. So you can go to an investor and train them to think about gender lens and gender lens questioning. You can explain that and help them become aware of what they're doing. That's a great way to tackle it. But we can also do something on our side because we don't know if we can change them or not, right? But we might be able to change something we do that helps to tackle that implicit bias that's in place. So this particular research that I want to share with you was developed through they did a bunch of pitch videos and investor meeting videos at TechCrunch New York, and they used AI to pick apart the language of these conversations and determine definitively that men and women were treated differently in a very specific way. Questions to males were promotion oriented. Now, promotion, what they're talking about here, is oriented on hopes, achievements, advancement, and ideals. So another way of saying that is that the questions had the opportunity to have more of a positive lens on what the follow-up question was. Questions to females were 66% prevention oriented. So prevention orientation is more of a negative connotation, focused on safety, responsibility, security, and vigilance. So what that means is that after the pitch occurred, the investor asked a question that either gave the entrepreneur an opportunity to say something positive or gave the entrepreneur an opportunity to address a negative concern. And that is a huge disadvantage to women that are pitching. And this has been proven out in more studies than just this one. So what can we do about that? Here is a little bit of detail on the kinds of examples of promotion and prevention. So for example, under projections here, we have growth. The question that the investor is asking after I gave my pitch and, did a stellar job as a female, instead of saying, what major milestones are you targeting for this year? The investor might say the prevention question, how predictable are your future cash flows? So if I was the male and they say the promotion question, what are your major milestones? That gives me a chance to paint an amazing picture about my goals and what I'm going to do to target my profit goals. And instead, if they ask how predictable are your cash flows, I'm in a position of defending what is happening with my business instead of painting that wonderful positive outlook. So this is something that is affecting us all the time in our, in the cultural environment, but in this particular type of meeting that we're all seeking to have at some point where we want to convince an investor to either, give a grant, give debt, give equity to our business, we need to be able to address these questions and in anticipation that they're going to be biased. So here's what I think we should do about this as women. I think that we should take the prevention questions that were asked and answer them with the promotion answer. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if they ask me, how predictable are your future cash flows? I'm going to give the answer that paints the picture of the positive outcomes that I have planned based on my amazing marketing plan, instead of answering the prevention question. It sounds a little tricky, but we see people in the media doing this every single day. They show up and the interviewer asks the question, and then they answer whatever they were planning to answer anyway. And it sometimes can be a little bit funny. If you want to make sure you're listening carefully, you're still speaking to what the investor is trying to find out, but that you're putting yourself in that positive position. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice this idea. What I would like to do is to, we're going to do breakout sessions, and I'm going to have to actually ask you how we want to do this. But what I'd like you to do in your breakout session is either use one of the questions that's on this list here, or make up a question and role play with your partner to ask them a prevention question, the ones that are on the right column here, or make one up, a more negatively oriented question. But you can just pick one of these if you want. And then the other party, go ahead and try to answer the answer using a positive spin, as if they didn't ask, how much money did you make last year? Answer the question with what you plan to make next year instead. Okay, does everybody understand the exercise? And Yo, can you let me know what the steps are going to be? I can stop sharing, or just let me know what we need to do to set up the breakouts.
All right, so I've actually set up the breakouts with 2 people on each room. So if you could kindly maybe think of a question now, or if you could write the questions that you want to ask on your notebook, that would be good. So that later on when you go to the breakouts, I don't think we will be able to share these questions when you go into the breakouts. So maybe if you could take maybe a minute for you to think about the question, or copy any questions that you want from this list before
Perfect.
we put you into the breakout rooms.
And then we'll take half the time, and then we'll switch partners. So each person gets to do the question and the answer. Great. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the role play. Does anyone want to share with the group what their experience was like in trying to answer with the promotion answer to the prevention question? How'd it go? Let's see.
This is Kylie.
Hi, Kylie.
So Arlette and I, I posed the question, and I think I didn't realize how hard hitting the question would be on both me and Arlene. And like even I was triggered by my own question. But then like I also realized how because it's such a triggering question, it's so easy to just like rattle off, and like take it very personally, and even feel offended by it. But I think it's like, yeah, that's why I think there needs to be some sort of, as you said, like practice, or in a way like training to like see what the person, or let's say like an investor, is really asking, rather than like the maybe last minute bias or tendency to be biased, like an offhand comment. So I think it's like super important to just remember what exactly is what is at the core of his ask. What is he prioritizing? Is it trust? Is it the money? Is it right? So there. Until now, I still feel triggered.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I mean, that's the thing about this. You're right. We could have spent this entire session today practicing this and doing the role play. It is something that does take some work. you know, the media personalities that spin everything, they have gotten a lot of practice at that. But now that we've thought about it and been kind of, you know, now that we've seen this thinking, we can all kind of keep this in mind. And even if you practice by writing some things down, if you don't always have somebody to pretend with. The other thing I would recommend is having a few key stories in mind that are the big highlights you want to demonstrate about your business that are outside of the pitch. So within the pitch, you have, you know, you have the structured elements that you need to hit. You're going to walk through all of that stuff. But I would go into the investor meeting with a few key stories in mind, to go ahead and whenever a question is in that category, go ahead and tell that story. You know, that's a way to prepare as well, to give promotion answers to prevention questions. Great. Does anybody else want to comment on the experience of the role play? Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and just highlight a couple of the takeaways again. So, you know, the gender bias, implicit bias thing is in play within the minds of the people who are making these decisions. And even if they're not trying to do these behaviors, if they're not actively trying not to do them, they might do it anyway. So what can we do? We can practice answering with a positive spin, and we can prepare key stories that highlight what we want to share about our business. Cool. All right. Well, we have one more research. Oh, one more research focused insight and strategy. And that is about negotiation. So negotiation is a skill that is learned in a social context, just in life, but it's also trained in business school and other environments. But it's both opposite of the cultural training of women, and not often trained for women. So I said that a bit awkwardly. Let me say it again a little more clear. You know, women are conditioned to take what they can get instead of ask for what they want. And they're often conditioned, we're conditioned to, you know, not be as aggressive and to not, you know, do the steps of negotiation, which have to do with being very clear about what you want and being able to communicate with confidence. So negotiation, as it states on the slide here from Harvard Law, negotiation is a critical skill for all leaders, and it serves a particularly important function for women leaders by giving them the wherewithal to counter the effects of second-generation gender bias. So this is a research finding that is showing that women who gain negotiation skills are more effective as leaders, and more effective, of course, in this situation at closing the deal that they want. So what can we do about it? I think one of the keys to negotiation is preparation. So one of the ways that we can prepare is presented in this diagram that I'll walk you through. Coming into a negotiation is, you know, we've got all of the things, the fundamentals we discussed earlier. You know, we have to have our financials in order. We have to have our ask. We know our valuation, all of that. But the ask is not as simple as just knowing one number to say. The ask has to do with what's shown on the green square here, which is the difference between the lowest acceptable terms and the desired terms for the entrepreneur. So this would be considered the range of acceptable options from your own perspective. And you should go into the meeting knowing exactly what those look like for you. Then we have on the other side, the investor settlement range, which represents for them, you know, they want the most for the least amount of money. That is quite simply, you know, how their range works. The highest acceptable terms are at the top. That would mean the highest that they're willing to pay for the least amount of equity, if it's an equity arrangement, for the least amount of interest for a debt arrangement. And then the desired terms at the other end of the spectrum, of course, would be the highest amount of interest and, you know, or the cheapest amount of investment for the most amount of equity. Then what you have in the center, this calls it the zone of potential agreement, which is the space where it's a win-win for both. That's the only space where a deal gets made. It has to be above your lowest acceptable terms and below their highest acceptable terms for a deal to happen at all. So if you go into the situation with the investor without understanding ahead of time what your lowest acceptable term is, you might end up on the fly accepting something that doesn't fit your parameters and losing your negotiation position. There's a thing that they call a BATNA, which is just a silly acronym for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. And that is all a bunch of fancy jargon to say, what is the least amount of money that would make this worth it for you? You know, if you're doing an equity deal and you're looking for 150K, you should know whether or not 125 would be acceptable for you, just in case, or what exactly that lowest acceptable term is. Because the BATNA is actually saying, if it's 125, I've already determined that it's better for me to just grow my business organically, or that it's better for me to go back to that banker and get that debt that I already decided against because it's actually a better deal than this equity arrangement. So it's all about, you know, it's individual for each of you what these terms look like. But the point is more about thinking it through in advance, being prepared so that you don't get caught off guard and lose the position in the negotiation. Because if the investor makes an offer, that is taking a position in the negotiation. The next step is for you to respond. Of course, you don't have to, you don't have to make a final decision in the seat right then. It's not usually expected. You know, you would usually close the meeting with, with a positive handshake, or maybe we're not doing handshakes anymore, but, you know, you would close with a agreement to consider it or to decide. You don't necessarily have to decide right in the moment, but what you are doing in the moment is the negotiation. So if they make you an offer and you want to make a counter, it's very important that you go in prepared with these ideas in mind. So I want to give you another little tip that I have found really helpful in my experience in negotiations. So sometimes it can feel scary to make a counter offer because you don't want to say no to the offer on the table. So what you want to think about is you hear the offer from the investor and it's not the offer that you want, but it's not below your lowest acceptable terms. But you still want them to consider, you know, what you hear is below your ideals. You want them to consider something else. I have found this phrase, would you consider, to be incredibly powerful. I was taught this from, you know, it was a male actually, a male friend of mine who had taken a class in negotiation skills and taught me some tips. And it sounds like the most simple thing, but I have found it to be incredibly powerful. An example of a time that I first used it, he was teaching me this because I was about to land a new job. And it was a job with a salary. And typically, you know, when you have that conversation, they make you an offer. And this was going to be the first time in my life that not only was I going to be prepared to negotiate and not just say, yes, great, but also it was going to be an offer that was much more than I was used to receiving in my salary. So it was going to be really hard for me in that moment to not just say, yes, I'll take it, please give it to me, but I wanted to use all of the knowledge that I had gained in my graduate school and in this one conversation about negotiations, and make sure that as a woman, I was negotiating to the maximum amount of salary offer that I could get. And so I used this trick of this phrase. It's just as simple as, if they make you an offer, you don't want to say no, you want to say yes, and you want to say an implied yes, in that you're saying, would you consider? Would you consider doesn't mean, no, I don't want that offer. It gives you the chance to say, would you consider this higher amount because of, and then you can create a justification and make a clarifying point about why your business is worth that. So it not only gives you a chance to present a counter offer without being negative toward their offer, it allows you to give another reason why your business is worth that much money. So the would you consider move is incredibly simple and incredibly powerful. And this is something that you can actually test out in any type of negotiating situation. If you're trying to get your child to eat their sandwich, that one, it's not very high stakes, but instead of saying no, eat your sandwich, you can say, would you consider? Silly example, but the would you consider conversation, I think, is a really useful tool, and it allows you to ensure that you're creating more considerations and more offers. They can still say, no, I don't want to accept your counteroffer, but then you're still in a position to say, yes, I accept your original offer, but I appreciate that you considered my point. So I'll pause there to see what you guys are thinking about. Let's open up. First, I will ask if you have any questions about this. We'll go back to the complicated slide. Anyone have questions? Has anybody heard of, oh, go ahead.
Hi, Lisa. I was wondering, are there other iterations of would you consider? For example, if there are, if option 1 doesn't work, and then option 2 doesn't work, option 3 doesn't work, and you're kind of just like back and forth during that meeting, So just wondering.
I mean, the concept behind would you consider is the concept of yes and, which is a communication concept that comes from improvisation, where it's a theater thing. And I don't know if this is making it too complicated, but it's a theater thing where everything that the actors do is made up on the spot. And if one of the actors says, hi, Mom, come sit at this table, then the other actor has to yes and that, which means they have to accept what was presented by the first actor and pretend that they're the mom and the table exists. So applying the improv theater concept to life can be really helpful. And I think it's really good in negotiations. The whole foundation of the concept is not to say no. Not in terms of making the deal. In terms of making the deal, at the end, there is a yes or no. But during the negotiation, you want to continue adding to the conversation rather than saying no and not taking the offer until you reach that final decision. Language-wise, I don't think there's another way of saying it necessarily, except for that the yes and can sort of be implied in your mind, and spoken of, you know, in any type of situation. Was that helpful? I would try just using the exact words for that one, because it's simple and it gives you a way to make the counter.
Got it. Thank you.
Adding the theater part probably didn't clarify, but it is the foundation of the concept. Anyone else have any questions about negotiation? I mean, there's definitely a ton out there that you can learn about negotiation. There are books, there are some great YouTubes. It's just definitely a thing to try to continue to practice again and develop. It's definitely one of the things that comes out in all of the research about women negotiating their salaries, women negotiating their investment deals. And it's a way that we can help ourselves to close that gap that we're facing.
Lisa, I have a question. Although I have already done the negotiation part, and I'm still waiting for their answer. So I had a recent negotiation with a prospect partner, and it's like the percentage. He's negotiating with the percentage, and I was like hesitant to really peg a number. So I just wait for him to say a number, and then I just reply if it is acceptable or not. We did some like around 4 exchange of email, and I have a common friend who guides me with the negotiation, and she just said that you should get more as an initial investment, not the minimum one. So stick with it's like you get the 60%, that's the negotiated investment. So don't go below that 60%. That's her advice. So is that I'm saying, is it okay if like he said a number, and then I say that the term is a bit exchanging information before I really say that, okay, I considered kindly, what I said is kindly consider this term, and I hope you understand that building the full tech company is very heavy on people and development and equipment. I just put it in my note email to him. So is that okay? I mean,
Yes, I would say that, can you consider, would you consider that it's the same phrase? And essentially what I would encourage you to do is say, would you consider, and then, a number that improves the deal for you, and then add a reason, not just, okay, because it's expensive to accomplish this, but add a reason that's positive as well. So
okay.
thinking back to the promotion prevention, say, to really achieve
Yeah,
the vision,
yeah.
to really achieve the vision that we talked about and the growth that is the potential of this business, I would love to see X number. Would you consider X number? Make sure to use the opportunity to provide either a little bit of information or, an enticing positive spin on the direction that the business can go with that proper investment. And one
Okay,
other
I
thing
got that. Thank you. Yes.
I have another quick one about if it's a equity percentage. I don't know if that's the type of percentage you're talking about, but when you're talking about dilution, there's also an argument of, you know, if you overly dilute ownership of a company when it's very early stage, it's not really best for the growth of the company and all of the employees. So, you know, you can also position a phrase about, you know, about equity percentage as, you know, for the health of the company and the future of the company, rather than, you know, you're taking my piece of the pie.
Exactly, exactly. You got it all right.
Great.
Thank you
Thank you
again.
for that. Okay, so I want to go ahead and wrap up. So for this section, negotiation, the two takeaways are just think ahead, that preparation piece, the diagram, understanding exactly where your ceiling and your floor are, what you're willing to take, and being prepared with those numbers in mind before you go to the meeting. And then, oh, sorry, excuse me, and the would you consider. And so this last slide just highlights kind of all of the takeaways of our day. So this has been a really fun, for me, chance to share with you guys this research and these strategies that I've developed because I am really passionate about empowering women to close the gender gap in investment. I really want to see you guys be successful, and I hope that these tools will be helpful for you. I welcome any of your questions now or an email later. And of course, I also welcome you guys to connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like to. So thank you very much, everyone. I very much appreciate your time.